Well, welcome everyone to another episode of Rhody Football Game Day. Of myself, Noah McLean, alongside Connor DeRosia and Johnny Blair. And guys, to put it simply, how about those Rhode Island Rams, man? It is a big-time win yesterday that secured, for the first time in 39 years, a conference championship with a 10-2 record, 7-1 overall in conference. And, there is a lot to be still kind of figured out as to where the Rams will fall into this playoff picture. But we have a fantastic show for you. We're going to review the 2024 CAA season, how Rhode Island captured the CAA crown, some of the top moments, preview the FCS playoff picture, and a heck of a lot more. So without further ado, stay tuned for another episode of Rhody Football Game Day. Well, guys, it is crazy when we think about this, that the 2024 season has come and gone in terms of, at least for now, the regular season, because as we know, Rams getting that CAA shared title yesterday. But let's kind of break down what else happened throughout the CAA as we wrap up the final week of the season, regular season here. William and Mary entered Saturday with playoff aspirations, but the Richmond Spiders, they said no thank you on their senior day, 27-0. Just a big spot there for Richmond to come in and make a statement against William and Mary. Richmond, who had already won a share of the conference title and secured an automatic qualifying CAA bid, rushed the ball 50 times for 238 yards and 3 rushing touchdowns.
And then going up to New York, Albany took on Hampton, where they were down 28-0, and then they went on to score 41-6 in the second half. Just an absolutely insane comeback, led by a pick six, a blocked point after, and just kind of just controlling the game in the second half.
And then next up, the Villanova Wildcats defeated the Delaware Blue Hens. That makes me feel pretty good, seeing Delaware lose. Close game between the Rams and Delaware a couple weeks ago. And that's Delaware's last game, not only in the CAA, but FCS as a whole, as they're moving to the FBS next year. Veteran linebacker Braden Bell had a total of 11 tackles, a 38-yard interception, a forced fumble, and a 6-yard rushing touchdown. What in the Travis Hunter is that stat line, guys? What a performance by Braden Bell.
Yeah, absolutely. When we think about other teams, let's talk about what the Monmouth Hawks pulled off a massive upset, and the receiving end of that, rather, was the Stony Brook Seawolves on their senior day, 55-47. Wow. Offense, I think, is one word that I would describe that one, guys. In a game with over 1,200 yards of offense combined, it was a 40-yard touchdown pass from receiver Trey Neal to tight end Jack Neary that gave the Hawks the go-ahead touchdown with 3 minutes left in that contest.
And then also staying north for me is in Orono, Maine, of course. New Hampshire Wildcats made a case for their playoff appearance against UMaine, where they relied on Caleb Mead, their running back, on the ground, who finished with over 110 yards rushing and a touchdown on 19 carries. Just an efficient workload for him.
Yeah, next up, the North Carolina A&T Aggies finished their season at a rough 1-11, guys. They lost to the Elon Phoenix 31-21. Elon receiver Chandler Prayboy was everywhere. He had 12 catches, 118 yards, and a touchdown grab.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Towson Tigers beat Campbell to the tune of a 45-23 win. Another commanding there. Towson's offense finished 5 rushing touchdowns, including 3 from Tyrell Green Jr.
And then, of course, it comes right back here to the University of Rhode Island Rams, going against their in-state rival, Bryant, and securing the win 35-21. and securing their first ever CAA conference championship and first conference title since 1985. It's been a long time coming for this Rams team. And, of course, again, it was led by running back Malik Grant, who has just had a phenomenal season, had 37 attempts, 204 yards, 3 rushing touchdowns, and a receiving touchdown on top of that. He's just been everything for this team. He tied Jaden McKenzie for season rushing touchdown record that he just set last year. It's just been an incredible season for the Rams.
Yeah, it really has. And I think, one thing to look at, guys, when you think about how the offense on the ground kind of started slow and you kind of saw this evolve, that's huge, because we talked about the Rams kind of sneaking away with not really putting up a lot of points. I feel like that last week, not only getting that conference championship, but being able to put up 35 points on the board in your last week is a great way to do so. As we will look now quickly at the final standings for the regular season, Richmond at 10-2, 8-0. Rhode Island also at 10-2, 7-1 in conference. Delaware 9-2 overall, 6-2 in the CAA. Now they are obviously ineligible, so that will not really look to much there. Villanova 9-3 overall, a 6-2 record. New Hampshire 8-4, 6-2 overall in the 6-2 in the CAA. Stony Brook 8-4. I'm sure they are kind of punching the air right now after that loss that put them down a little bit more. Towson at 7-5, respectable, not going to get them in. 5-3 though in the conference. Elon at 6-6 with a 5-3 in conference. William and Mary 7-5. 4-4 record here in conference, and then Monmouth 6-6, Maine went 5-7, Hampton 5-7, UAlbany 4-8. That one at the beginning of the season, guys, when you think back to where UAlbany ended up and where we thought they were going to be in those first few episodes, I think that's one of the teams that we saw kind of just fall backwards to the bottom of those standings. Campbell at 3-9, Bryan at 2-10, and then North Carolina A&T a 1-11 record overall and 0-8 in conference. So that is a look at the final standings of the CAA. When we come back, we'll take a look at just how Rhode Island was able to capture the CAA crown right here on Rhody Football Game Day. Well, guys, let's jump right into taking a look at just how Rhode Island was able to capture this crown here in the CAA. As we look, and we begin with Rhode Island Rams arriving back in July 30th to be specific. That's when all of this got started, with a month of practice ahead of their season opener on August 31st. That was right here against the Holy Cross game. That was the Miracle at Mead. That was the game to remember. I mean, when you think about it, guys, to me at least, that seems like only last week we were just talking about that. We were just kind of discussing all of the things that were going on with that. And then also, when you think about it, head coach Jim Fleming had back all 3 coordinators for a second straight season. I mean, that just starts off in the upstairs rooms, guys. This is exactly what you want from a team led by offensive coordinator Patrick Murphy, defensive coordinator Chris Laurenti, and special teams coordinator Troy Gilmer. But, guys, I mean, you can't ask for much more from the beginning of a season to have that kind of core group behind you.
Yeah, one thing I just want to add. There's a statement saying you can't win your season, you can't win the championship in the first couple weeks of the season, but you can definitely lose it. And if Rhode Island doesn't pull off that miracle comeback against Holy Cross, we might be sitting outside of the playoffs right now as a 3-loss team. We've seen Rhode Island get kind of screwed out of playoffs with right on the fence. So if Rhode Island doesn't make that comeback and they're a 3-loss team, maybe we're definitely not conference champions with Richmond, and maybe we're on the outside looking in.
And then, of course, let's start on the offensive side. It goes way past just one offensive coordinator. Obviously, Coach Murphy also coaches quarterbacks, led a group of, including associate head coach and offensive line coach Mike Flanagan, wide receiver coach Tyler Loftus, running back coach Luke Jenkins, tight ends coach Adam Griggs, with assistant staff including Dylan Costello, Aiden McClellan, Sebastian De La Sudis, and then quarterbacks assistant and director of football operations, John Phils Aim.
Yeah, on defense, Laurenti, who also coaches inside linebackers, and those inside linebackers, last year, losing Evan Stewart and replacing him with the pieces that we had this year has been huge. It's been huge, so controlling the run game and, helping out in the pass game where needed. He was also joined by Gilmer, who coaches outside linebackers, AJ Pena in that room, and defensive line coach Marcel Lazard. Defensive backs coach Yanni and assistant Brandon Holt and Justin Woodard.
Yeah, well, guys, I mean, just as you talked about there, Connor, a lot of guys in that defensive room as well. There's so many people that just make all of these things be able to happen. When you think about the team itself, there's a lot of players that happen, but there's also so many coaches and other just aspects of this team that make it what it is. We also want to say, additionally, Chief of Staff Vince Sinagra assists with the specialist team. Team Chaplain Robert Izzy, who helps with offensive line, and then the Assistant Director of Operations, Jack Monafusco. Rounding out the staff on the front office side of things includes General Manager Jeff Wozencroft and the Assistant General Manager and Creative and Digital Coordinator, Mason Smoller. That's the man, the myth, the legend right there. We talk about all the people here. He is the man that makes all of this happen. So make sure when you guys are watching this at home, if you got his Twitter or anything, give him a big shout out, because that is one of the unseen heroes of this program right there.
And then joining the largest staff in head coach Jim Fleming's tenure is the largest set of interims with the team, including coaching, recruiting, and scouting, creative and film, and many other departments across the athletic, training, and equipment. With their support, the team has the staff around them necessary to pursue a conference champion like they've been able to do this year.
Yeah, and just before we jump in here, Connor, and I don't mean to get in before you, but when you think about the atmosphere of Rhode Island football, and when you go to that sideline or even to a game, when you see the amount of interns that are there, the amount of people that are trying to get onto that field, to be there to film a game, to do all of these different things, it is so much greater than we have ever seen before. And again, I think that goes back to, when we talk about this program and all that it stands for with this family aspect, it's building the community, 3 more feet, all of these things. And of course, the winning helps. But, it's just been a totally different feel, at least for me, guys, when you think about, say, the years previous as opposed to this season.
Yeah, completely agree. But at the end of the day, it's the players on the field. It's the players between the lines on the gridiron. And, coming into this year, Rhode Island lost a ton of big pieces. Kasim Hill, starting quarterback for ages, graduated. We lost Jada McKenzie, Evan Stewart, Lorenzo Thompson, Katero Summers, Jordan Colbert, tons of players, on practice squads in the NFL or, just graduating, moving on to careers. So there was a lot of question marks coming into this year, but Rhode Island has filled those holes perfectly with either development or transfers. The likes of Malik Grant, Devin Farrell, unfortunately out for a little while, but he's been a revelation at the quarterback position. Hunter Helms has filled in nicely these last couple of weeks. And then we can't speak enough about A.J. Pena. I mean, probably he's towards the top of the conference in sacks. He's just everywhere. He's a game wrecker. He's not a game breaker. He's a game wrecker. When offensive coaches are having their game plan, they're circling number 8 every single time. And then, Wesley Neal can't be understated how great he's been. Blocked field goal just 2 weeks ago to seal the victory. And then the cornerback room, okay, especially Freddie Malay. Okay, he's a little undersized. I was a little nervous this year when he broke something in his hand. He's at a club. I call him Club Freddie now, okay? We're going to Club Freddie. He's been everywhere. He's so much fun to watch. One of the most athletic players I've ever seen. Funny enough, I was watching Instagram Reel the other day, courtesy of Cam Isimone. Found out he went for 521 yards in high school on the ground. I didn't realize that was possible for a player to rush for 521 yards in a game, guys.
That is just a couple of yards on the ground, I would say. There has also been a handful of players who have taken a massive leap forward from their time, kind of in their assumed starting roles from last spring. Offensive tackle Brock Bethea flipping it from right to the left side. Center Trey Alexander, linebacker Cole Brockwell, and Devin Hightower, also along with cornerback Braden Price. But, again, this is just things that you talk about, guys being able to adjust. It's next man up mentality, and all these guys have done that so well.
And then also, you kind of mentioned Connor kind of mentioned the new pieces that have filled in very nicely. You can't talk enough about Malik Grant, what he's meant for this offense, along with Greg Gaines and Sean Harris. Sean Harris, of course, had that game-winning touchdown at the Miracle of Mead that felt like yesterday. He's been fantastic. And then from training camp on, the heart of this team was the core. It was the culture for this team, just the unwillingness to quit, and the family mantra preached every day by head coach Jim Fleming, that's powered this team through so much adversity. You just mentioned again how Devin Farrell, who's missed the last few weeks, hopefully he can come back, but how Hunter Helms just kind of stepped up and has led for 2 straight wins in a row now. help sealing the CAA conference. Just the fight through adversity, all the things that this team has been through. You can't understate how much Coach Jim Fleming has built a culture of never giving up around this team.
Yeah, and you speak about the family, culture. And one of the things that stuck out to me last week against Bryant was Hunter Helms after the game was doing an interview. And all he could talk about is the family atmosphere and the culture. This is a man who spent many years at Clemson, one of the premier college football stations, and all he could talk about is how great the culture is here at Rhode Island. That's part of the reason he came here was a family atmosphere. That's why he chose here, and that just speaks wonders, And the Rams this year finished 10-2, 7-1 record overall. First conference championship since '85, basically the 40-year anniversary, which is pretty cool because we talked about that '84-'85 team a lot this year. And when you look at this, this season for the Rams, the two losses, one coming to Minnesota, who nearly beat ranked Penn State the other day, lost by one, should have won that game. And then Delaware, which we didn't have our starting quarterback, and they're moving to FBS next year. So, yes, it's you want to be perfect, but those are two losses where you're like, okay, we can see where you lost, and we still, had an unbelievable season and look to, further in the playoffs, hopefully with a home playoff game.
Yeah, absolutely. When you think about just some other opponents that, Rhode Island has kind of played and been able to have success against. Of course, yesterday I was having a conversation and somebody texted me and they said, hey, it's 14-13, Rhode Island's down at halftime. And I just sent them a text back and I go, check it in 20 minutes. And I said, this is a second half team. And then I actually put a little mark to say, let me correct that. They're a fourth quarter team in most of their games. But despite that, they've been able to come out with victories against Campbell, Brown, New Hampshire, Maine, Monmouth, Bryant, and just a heck of a lot of other different teams that they've been able to do that against. Additionally, Rams took care of business winning tight games against Holy Cross, LIU, Hampton, and UAlbany. Of course, UAlbany, talk about to the wire, that blocked field goal by Wesley Neal Jr. Man, that was awesome. But all on their way to their first ever CAA title, first conference win in 39 years, and the first playoff berth in 39 years as well. As we'll step aside and we'll highlight some of the top moments of the 2024 regular season right here on Rhody Football Game Day. Well, guys, now let's kind of jump into taking a look at some of the top moments of the 2024 regular season. Of course, there are so many to look from with this special team each week, day in and day out. But let's begin all the way back in week one, that 2017 Miracle at Meade. With 19 seconds to go in the game, QB Devin Farrell finds wide receiver Sean Harris Jr. for a game-winning touchdown from 31 yards out. A performance of the game from Farrell, who finished 20 for 33 for 287 yards in the air and 2 touchdowns as well to go with 54 rushing yards. That was kind of the first time that we saw that not only was he going to be able to get it done in the air, but also use his legs as a very dangerous threat.
And then jump to week 3 where we hosted Campbell in a game. We won that 21-9 with just under 5 minutes remaining in the third quarter. Devin Farrell hits Marquise Buchanan for a 25-yard strike, a passing touchdown, jumps the lead to 21-3. And then, of course, we're going to talk about him a lot, I'm sure. A.J. Pena, who finished with 8 tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, and, of course, a fumble recovery, just doing everything for the defense.
Yeah, and then week 4, the Rams went down to LIU and took another close victory, 28-21. A crazy fourth quarter comeback by the Rams, led by Hunter Helms, not even Devin Farrell this time. And Malik Grant punched in the game-winning touchdown with just over a minute left in the game. Malik Grant finished with 20 carries for 141 rushing yards and 3 rushing touchdowns. This man, when he gets in the end zone, he likes to get in flurries. He likes to get in there 2, 3, maybe even 4 times.
Yeah, absolutely. Then we're going to go to week 6. So with a 46-44 double overtime win in Hampton. I mean, for those of you that maybe, I'll tell you one thing. that was a wild one. And if were watching this game not on a screen but refreshing it on live stats, you are nothing short of but confused as to how this even came to be. But despite that, it was a back and forth contest all game long, guys. The Rams just finally sealed the deal thanks to quarterback Devin Farrell once again. Had a 2-yard rushing touchdown to win the game after a game-tying touchdown run from running back Malik Grant with 24 seconds left in the fourth quarter. Performance of the game had to go, though, to Cole Brockwell, who had 7 tackles, including 3 tackles for a loss and 2 sacks as well.
Yeah, Noah, you speak about, updating on your phone. That was me. There was about 4 times. I wasn't able to watch the game, but there was about 4 times I'm checking ESPN, and I'm like, oh, the Rams lost. Oh, the Rams won. Oh, the Rams lost. It was like that for a solid 20, 30 minutes. And I was so confused. I was there with some of my friends. They were confused, and it was a frenzy, but one heck of a game from the Rams.
I'm glad I was not the only one feeling those emotions.
And then we're going to jump to the next week. The Governor's Cup, one of the most highly touted games of the season for Rhode Island and for Brown, too. A big rivalry game. The Rams put this one in the books after being down 21-17 entering the fourth quarter behind a 45-yard rushing touchdown from wide receiver Sean Harris before Devin Farrell sealed the deal with a 5-yard rushing touchdown with 2 minutes and 49 seconds remaining in the game. The performance of the game goes to Emmanuel Gomes, who laid down a bunch of monster hits throughout the entire game and, of course, had an interception. Just an all-around good team win against a good opponent to seal the Governor's Cup. Keep that here in Kingston for at least another year.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, now maybe the sweetest victory outside of Bryant for the Rams is winning up in New Hampshire. We've known that winning up in Durham for the Rams has been difficult, going back decades, not even just under the Jim Fleming era, but decades. Rhode Island was able to get a dominant 26-9 victory. Some weird scoring in the first half. I remember checking the score, and it was 2-3 sometime in the first half. And I'm like, how in the world? I understand the safety, but then it just looks weird. It feels like a scoregami. But there was a ton of big plays, especially special teams, with a fumble recovery touchdown by defensive back Freddie Camp in the third quarter. Performance of the game has to go to defensive back Freddie Millay. I love him. Club Freddie. Okay, anytime he's around the ball, it's Club Freddie there. He finished with 8 tackles, a tackle for loss, and 1 fumble forced, and an interception. Crazy game from Freddie.
Yeah, and before we jump to Week 9 here, I had the privilege of going down to New Hampshire for that game, guys. And when you saw guys that had been on this team before and the entire coaching staff that knows what it was like to not be able to have that success in the past, especially for Coach Flem, but for other guys, like Wesley Neal, like AJ Pena, who've experienced this rivalry and the bitterness of it, right? So watching them come out and really just take over in that game, watching the fans exit that stadium early was just absolutely a thrilling feeling for Rhode Island and me as well. But now let's not dwell too much on that. Week 9, a 24-14 win over Maine. Rams took down Maine behind a 6-sack performance from the defensive line. The player of the game going to defensive lineman Carson Primrose, who finished with 4 tackles, 2 for a loss, and 2 sacks to complement with the cherry on top.
And then jumping to Week 10, we had talked about that Monmouth offense going into that week, how dominant they were. And the Rams at home take it 37-28 in a thrilling victory where the Rams had sprinted into the second half for the lead with a go-ahead touchdown from wide receiver Marquise Buchanan with 1:17 remaining in the game before the lateral trickery on that final play went awry for Monmouth. I'm not sure I'm a big fan of those kind of calls when you need to score. But it didn't work for Monmouth as, of course, Freddie Millay, Club Freddie, returned it for a game-sealing touchdown. The performance of the game, of course, has to go to Marquise Buchanan, who I just mentioned. 12 catches, 171 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Just one of the first of some of his big games that he had racking up in November.
Yeah, Marquise just dominant pretty much all year long for this Rams team. Big season for him. And now jumping to Week 12, my favorite game of the year. Okay, I spoke on New Hampshire being probably the sweetest victory for the team, but Week 12, a 20-17 victory over UAlbany. Going into halftime, down 17-0. The talk between all of us on the sideline was, "Oh, we're a second half team." But I'm gonna be honest, I was a little scared. Okay, I was scared because the offense wasn't moving the ball, and they were just steamrolling us on defense. And things were going our way. Sean Harris gets a punt return call back, but things softened out. I need to hear what Jim Fleming's saying at halftime. By the way, okay, for this team to be so good in the second half, I need to hear what he is saying. But starting out of the second half, Malik Grant had a 42-yard rushing touchdown. To get some life into the team, and then it was kind of wrapped from there. 20 unanswered points in the second half. Blocked field goal by Wesley Neal. I don't know how somebody that big can move so agilely and be such a dog on the defense side of the ball. And then, it can't even be understated. Andre Pena-Gray, Braden Price, Freddie Millay, that secondary, Andre Pena-Gray, with that interception on the 3-yard line to basically, that game's over. If he doesn't get a pick there, if they score, even if they get 3, that game's at least going to overtime. So what a play by him. That's probably the defining play of this season for the Rams.
Yeah, I can't, say much more about that. I think you nailed it right on the head, Connor, with that one. It was just an unbelievable game to be at, and the atmosphere around here with that yet another themed comeback from behind win. And then let's talk about the last one, 35-21 win over Bryant in the regular season finale and the CAA crown-clinching win. The Rams won with a second-half sprint yet again 14-13 and a half. Rams found themselves down. Running back Malik Grant finished with a ridiculous 37 carries, 204 rushing yards, 3 touchdowns, as well as 2 catches for 16 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown. And guys, this one, even though it was against a quote-unquote lesser opponent, right, this is a game that you have to win, and it's now to where they have moved themselves into with that win that makes this game so special. You saw the emotion, you saw the words of the commissioner, and this one was just a special game for all of Rhode Island football, everyone that has come before and current. So that's a look that we will give you there, of course, of the regular season, some of the highlights, but a lot more to come right here on Rhody Football Game Day.
I am Aaliyah Holloway, and I am here with Justin Theriot for an episode of Rhody Football Game Day. So here are where some of your Rhody Rams players rank among the CAA with the leaderboards. So Rhode Island finishes with the 6th ranked total defense in the CAA and the 5th in scoring defense. Running back Malik Grant finishes 3rd in rushing yards in the conference at 1,167, while tying for 2nd in rushing touchdowns with 13 and 5th in the conference in total scoring touchdowns.
Yeah, it was a great year for Malik Grant, really a great year for the conference overall. I mean, if Malik Grant had such a great year and there's still a couple running backs better than him, it just goes to show you just how great this conference was offensively this season. But despite missed time due to an injury, Devin Farrell finishes 8th in the conference in total offense with 197 yards per game. It was a great season for the redshirt sophomore, and we're excited to have him back going forward. Wide receiver Marquise Buchanan finished 4th in the CAA in receptions per game with 5.5. His 66 total receptions ranks 3rd in the conference on the year, and his 981 receiving yards also places him 3rd behind, of course, Landon Ruggieri, who we already talked about, and Campbell Sincere Brown. If you remember a while back, way back when we played Campbell, a lot was made about Sincere Brown and Rhode Island. Once again, that was the first time this year that we saw Rhode Island truly shut down a number 1 option, but just goes to show you how great of a year Marquise Buchanan had. He kind of started off, admittedly, pretty slow. He was a CAA first-teamer preseason, and it really wasn't a good start to the season. You gotta be truthful about that. But after that first month, Marquise just was fantastic. Admittedly, after the first month of the season, he was probably the best receiver in the conference, maybe outside of Landon Ruggieri. So really a great season for the Providence product. On the defensive side of the ball, we saw Cole Brockwell finish 7th in total tackles with 93, averaging almost 8 a game. AJ Pena, of course, another fantastic season for him. We talked about it, 10.5 sacks, 3rd most in the CAA, while leading the conference in tackles for loss with 18. And cornerback Brandon Price finished 7th in the conference with passes defended at 10.
A preview of Central Connecticut State. Central Connecticut State averages about 25 points per game with an average of 323 total yards of offense per game, while surrendering an average of 24 points per game to opponents. Overall, CCSU has defensively led has a defensively led team, with the offense doing enough win games behind a run game driven offensive attack as they look to establish the ground before opening up the passing game.
Yeah, and defensively, the Blue Devils, we've already talked about it, have a knack for forcing turnovers. 16 fumble recoveries in 12 games, 14 interceptions in 12 games, 30 forced turnovers in just 12 games. They're almost, due to win the turnover battle in every game they play. They do, however, struggle to convert in the red zone, having gone 27 of 48 in the red zone for touchdown opportunities. So that sort of explains how a team that forces so many turnovers ends up being 7-5. And let's take a look at some players to watch for the Blue Devils. Well, it's a running back, Elijah Howard. As you mentioned, Aaliyah, this is a team that relies on their run game. So Elijah Howard is that guy that's going to get it done for the Blue Devils. About 83 rushing yards per game, as well as 8 rushing touchdowns. At the wide receiver position, it's Michael Plaxton, 592 receiving yards on the season, and a team high 46 receptions on the year. Camille Clark, a fantastic defensive back. I mean, just gross, nasty, super talented. 109 tackles from the defensive back position is really just unthinkable. Defensive lineman Jalen Howard on that front four for the Blue Devils, 9.5 sacks on the season, and 12.5 tackles for loss. So CCSU with an AJ Pena of their own. Other defensive linemen, Dan Totley with 8 sacks and 10 tackles for loss as well. Gavin Taylor, their linebacker, 4.5 sacks, 8 tackles for loss. And then defensive back Devon Walden Jr., 3 interceptions, 9 pass breakups. So this is a team that, like you said, led by their defense, and they got a good handful of stars that make big plays happen on that end of the ball. So Rhode Island has struggled with turnovers throughout the season. They have had their moments of bad plays during important drives. So this is a team where they might not be great offensively, and your defense, Rhode Island's defense, should do a good job shutting down that offense. But on offense for the Rams, you're going to have to be buttoned up and clean, and make sure you do not make any unforced errors, because this Central Connecticut State team will force you to make errors on their own. And now we'll get into a breakdown of your Rhode Island Rams.
The key to success today for the Rams will be ground and pound with Malik Grant, Deion Silas, and Gabe Slope to open up the field for Marcus Buchanan and the receivers early and often. Do whatever it takes to win the trenches, both on the ground and protecting the quarterback from the Blue Devils' talented pass rush. We have to definitely keep CCSU from getting going on the ground game, force the quarterback to throw the ball to succeed, and, not lose in the turnover battle.
Rhode Island's lost the turnover battle in a lot of games this year, but in the playoffs, you just can't lose those kind of marginal battles. You can't lose the turnover battle. You can't, lose in the red zone execution battle. You can't lose on the third down battle. And most importantly, like you just said, Aaliyah, you can't lose in the trenches. This is a team that wants to get the ground game going against a team in Rhode Island that does get the ground game going every year. So, in my opinion, whichever team is able to get the ground game going first and thus open up the game for the passing attack will likely be the team that wins. Now, that's not to say that this game won't end up being close down the wire, and of course, that's when the turnover battle really comes into play in that fourth quarter part of the game, because as we just saw with the Bryant game this past week, Rhode Island was pretty much able to kill the game with that really long drive in the fourth quarter. Turnovers, well, they prevent that from happening, and they prevent you from scoring. So Rhode Island's going to have to make sure that they prevent turnovers at all costs. So now it's time for our game prediction, and we'll run through a couple of our standard questions. So first, Aaliyah, I will ask you, which team and what player will score first on Saturday?
Ooh, okay. So I say we're going to score first. And I say, Deion Silas.
Really? Now
that.
that is a wonderful pick. I'm a big fan of Deion Silas. He's a fantastic change of pace back, runs really, really hard. For me, I'll also agree with you. I'm more of a stats guy, or I'm really a stats guy, stats nerd, analytics nerd. So what I'll tell you is the stats say Rhode Island's going to score first. They average more points per game. They They typically do pretty well in the first quarter. And of course, I love your Deion Silas pick, but I'm gonna have to go Malik Grant. Fresh off 4 touchdowns, it's only fitting that I go with Malik Grant. So my second question for you, Aaliyah, will be, which team will take the lead going into halftime?
Ooh, so I obviously would want to say Rhode Island.
Right, obviously.
But we do have a little bit of we're a second half team, and that just it goes to be proven like time and time again.
Every week.
Just for predictions, I guess I'll say Connecticut. But we know who's taking.
We can say who's taking the game in the end, but you're right, Aaliyah. This Rhode Island team has been a second half team. Even this past week, they were losing to Bryant going into halftime, and now, well, we see Rhode Island as heavy favorites. They have 3 more wins, 3 less losses. They've been a lot more dominant than this CCSU team. I think if there was anywhere on this board to give the Blue Devils credit, it would be going into halftime. So, reluctantly, very, very reluctantly, not to give anyone any bullet board material, we will say, or I'll say, Central Connecticut State, maybe they're winning by 3 points. That's where I'll cut it off. 3 points maximum
Max.
that they're up going into halftime.
Yeah.
And honestly, truthfully, more likely, this game is tied going into halftime, and that's when we'll see probably that second half emergence.
Okay.
Who is going to be player of the game?
A kicker.
Really?
Maybe. Yeah.
You know what? I kind of agree, because it doesn't matter what happens for, the 60 minutes of the game. If Ty Groff were to go out there and hit a game winner, he's player of the game.
Yeah.
So I kind of agree with you there, Leah. I see the thinking. I see where you're coming from. For me, I think player of the game, it kind of would be lame and a cop-out to go with Malik Grant. I'm really leaning towards that, but we'll stay away from that. So for right now, I guess my answer will be A.J. Pena. He's had a fantastic season. Central Connecticut State, their quarterback has struggled. And if, Rhode Island wants to prevent that CCSU passing attack from getting any sort of momentum, give me AJ. I could see a couple of sacks this weekend. I could see a couple of tackles for loss today. And now, who makes the play of the game?
It might be Malik.
That's a perfect answer.
I can say that, yeah.
That's where I was going. Yeah. I think how many weeks in a row has it been where we've seen Malik Grant rip off a 40-yard run? Even if he doesn't finish it in the end zone.
Yeah.
He does it.
Crazy.
And he always electrifies the sideline. So
exactly.
I think we're on the same page here, Leah. Give me Malik Grant, the big play of the game. And now for our final question, Aaliyah, what is the final score going to be between the Central Connecticut State Blue Devils and the hosting Rhode Island Rams?
It's like 31.
Okay.
Rhode Island.
Okay.
31 Rhode Island, and let's go for 21.
Okay. So 31-21, Rhode Island.
20, or maybe 24.
24,
yeah,
okay.
Give them a little extra.
I'm going to be a little bit more hard. So on the year, Rhode Island has had some issues offensively. They've been good offensively, sometimes even, amazing. Great. But this is a very talented Blue Devils team, and it's going to be a really cold playoff atmosphere. To me, that kind of screams a little bit more of a low-scoring game. So I'm going to take Rhode Island. I guess since we're just, being strong with it, going with just this is what it is, not going to be iffy, we'll go Rhode Island 24. And now here's where I'm going to get hard.
Okay.
This CCSU team is not good offensively. Yeah. Their rushing attack, it's got a talented running back, but their O-line has struggled. As a team, they're averaging 3.7 yards per carry. Their passing attack has been non-factor. A 51 completion percentage, 15 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. That doesn't get my vote of confidence, I'll tell you that much. Especially going on the road to Rhode Island. You have a team that is 2-5 on the road against a team that is undefeated at home. So give me Rhode Island 24-6. I don't think Central Connecticut State gets much of anything going on offense. Any drive that they might have that goes pretty far, I could see it ending in a turnover. And the same could be said for Rhode Island. I do expect at least 1 or 2 turnovers for the Rams, so I don't expect this one to be too hard scoring. So I think I'll adjust it. Give me 21-6, Rhode Island. They walk away with a strong, confident victory, sort of similar to the Campbell game, maybe. So maybe 21-9, but that'll be my final prediction for this upcoming playoff game here at Meade Stadium for the first time since 1985.